What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Tyler, and this is Hooksets are free. It is about 9:30 p.m. here on Friday night. Is it Friday? Thursday night, December 23rd. Tomorrow's Christmas Eve, so love to wish all of you guys an early Merry Christmas and Happy New Year as we're in the holiday season now. So, my wife worked last night, is working tonight, and is off this holiday. So I will not be on the next couple nights, obviously, with it being Christmas Eve and Christmas itself. And then I'm probably going up to the mountains to do some skiing early next week. So you might not see me until a week from now, closer to New Year's. So hope you guys are doing well. What's up, Adam? What's up, Daniel? If you guys are watching this on the replay, by the way, I have turned on the live chat in the replay. So you can just click underneath this video on live chat, and it will pop up who is contributing in the chat. You'll be able to see Adam Odin and Daniel T right now hanging out. Hope you guys are doing well. Merry early Christmas. I feel particularly blessed because my kids are still young enough, being 6, 3, and obviously just 9 months, but they're all diehard believers in Santa Claus. So I've got quite a bit of work to do in the way of um, keeping that tradition going and and answering all their questions properly when it comes to how Santa gets into our house since we don't have a chimney, and if he likes other kinds of cookies, and how it is that their friends and other kids are getting to meet Santa Claus when they're not, and even share a meal with Santa, all that. So pretty fun. Um, what's up, Ron Holly, Bassless Chap in the house? What's up, Abe? Cool Granddaddy Sweets Forever. Glad you guys could make it. Hope you're doing well. I am drinking a New Belgium accumulation winter high winter hazy IPA tonight. This was left over from a little poker game that I played earlier this week, so thought I would crack it and enjoy it with you guys. Pretty delicious beer there. Adam says, debating on going fishing tomorrow. It's going to be cold. Well, I wish I could be debating on going fishing because our water is almost completely frozen over. There's only a couple of bodies of water that have partial open water, and the water is so cold. The couple of times that I've made an effort to get out over the last couple of weeks, I've had next to no success. I've managed to see a couple of pike. As I told you guys last week, I've managed to catch some trout a couple weeks back, but really fishing is pretty much over for me. So, with that being said, and with that in mind, we're going to talk tonight about what my most productive baits were this season in 2021. And then I might want some of your guys' opinions or ideas for giveaway stuff. I do have some ideas myself already, but I am going to post a giveaway between now and the new year, and give away a bunch of stuff. So anyway, Daniel says, I'm a fan of Fat Tire and Blue Paddle from New Belgium. Yeah, no doubt. Fat Tire is one of the originals. It's a classic, very good beer. But New Belgium, being local to Colorado, they come out with a bunch of seasonal beers, and they also make some more regular ones like this accumulation IPA, which is a good one. And I like to mix it up. As you guys know, I am a little bit more of an IPA or pale ale type of drinker. Sometimes American pale ale or like a hazy IPA, a little bit more something that is sessionable. I used to be like into double IPAs and super hopped beers. So cheers, guys. Yeah, Adam, don't feel bad about the cold at all. Justin, no diggity in the house. What's up, my man? How are you doing? Abe, did I see that Caro and Matt won big over at Burley's? I did not see that, but that's awesome. Congratulations. Looks like Matt is in the house already. What's up, Matt? How you doing tonight? Ryan Dyke, what is up? Ron says, I'm not used to this. It's 11:30 and it's 21 degrees. Yeah, well, welcome to the Northeast. Not that I live there, but congratulations on finally making the move, man. For all of you guys who didn't know, Ron, Bassless chap, finally did make the move cross country, all the way across the country from California to Rhode Island. And is really starting to settle in. So, congrats on making the move, but yeah, get ready and get used to the cold, man. That's going to be pretty brutal. Ryan says it's hard water season here in Saskatchewan, so I've been busy with that. Yeah, Ryan's a big time ice fisherman, and that is pretty sweet. Justin's keeping busy. Daniel says, when I was doing CNC work, I made a New Belgium sign for a guy. Hand stained and painted. Got it out on social media. New Belgium featured it on Instagram. That's pretty sweet, man. Right on. And Matt finally got his UFO crank down. Can't wait to use it and test this baby out. Got to send some pics. Yeah, right on. Send them my way, man. Be happy to check it out. Yeah, it's weirdly unseasonably warm here in the Denver metro area. Up in the mountains right now in Summit County, where I do a lot of skiing, they're supposed to get like a foot of snow tonight, I believe. I'm kind of disappointed I don't have an opportunity to get out tomorrow for the day because I'm at home with my kids, and obviously it's Christmas Eve. So, you know, you win some, you lose some when it comes to powder days and getting out on the mountain, and there will be plenty more to come. But finally, the mountains are starting to get some good snow, so I'm hoping that that means that the conditions get better, more terrain opens up quicker, and when I'm there next week, that I'll get a couple of good days in. We'll have to see about that. Thank you very much, Ryan. I appreciate that. Merry Christmas to all of you guys as well. Hope you guys and your families are able to enjoy some time together. We had to cancel a large family get together, and we were planning on going to see a play, see the Lion King here in downtown Denver, and it has been canceled. The COVID's making its way back around, so unfortunately, we're having to scale back and just be a little extra careful with who we are visiting with, so as to not create a super spreader event and get sick ourselves when we've been so careful this entire time. So, yeah, it's too bad to see people who are fully vaccinated, even boosted, and having breakthrough infections and getting the virus still. So, it's a dang shame. Justin's at only 600 feet elevation and has already had snow a couple times. That's pretty wild, man. Okay, guys, I want to talk about my top baits for the 2021 season, and I'd love to know if any of your guys's uh, overlap with mine. It would be interesting to hear that. So I'm going to talk about not necessarily just a top five, but I will start with my top five in theoretically what I caught the most fish on, what I had some of my most productive days on, and then I'll talk about a bunch of other baits that were um, really productive for me still. And I'll finish up by saying which ones I did not have the opportunity to use as much as I was hoping, and and hopefully that will change in 2022. So, first off, can you guys take a wild guess as to what my very most productive lure was this year? And it shouldn't be a wild guess for you guys. Should be pretty straightforward. Should be an easy guess for you guys. There were a handful of different colors of this bait that worked well for me, but still it was one bait in particular. Give you guys about 10 more seconds to guess. All right, so Matt says chatterbait. Daniel says chatterbait. Matt says, or the Ned Rig. Justin says swim baits. Ron says jackhammer. Justin says black and blue. Talking about black and blue swim baits or black and blue chatterbaits? Abe says lipless. No, Abe, not the lipless, unfortunately. That was one that didn't even quite make this entire list of baits that were rather productive for me this year. So you will see here, there's about 10, almost 15 baits that I'm going to mention. And some of them are techniques more than specific baits. But the lipless crankbait did not make it. So most of you guys are correct, and it was the chatterbait. And specifically, Ron Holly is correct, and it was the Jackhammer Chatterbait by a long shot. Part of that has to do with the fact that I use it more than anything. I just have more confidence in that bait than any other chatterbait on the market by a while. And there's a couple reasons for it. We've talked about it before, but I am happy to mention that again here right now. So as for color, that's tough to say. You know, there are a few colors that get a lot of use from me. And I will mention those first. So in the springtime, I use the High Top Craw color a lot. In the last 2 years, I've started to use the Fire Craw more, but still not necessarily more than the High Top Craw. I think there's something a little bit more natural that bridges the gap between, say, a craw and a bluegill or a baitfish with this green pumpkin back and red belly, as compared to, say, the fire craw that has a red back and a orange belly. So in the spring, early spring, I would say for me, that's in late March, all of April, and in May during the pre-spawn, I am using craw patterns primarily. Then as we start to get into and closer to the spawn, then I really start throwing bluegill imitations more than anything. So the Bee Height Delight color is one that I throw a lot of. I've actually retied this skirt up on here, so this isn't exactly what it looks like straight out of the package, but pretty dang close. Same color pattern. I probably have one here that hasn't been fished just yet. This is what it looks like straight out of the package. So a little bit more straightforward with a green pumpkin back. A little bit of that shaddy bottom with some chartreuse on the sides. So really love that color. I've talked about it for years now. I think just that hint of chartreuse on there works wonders. Also has chartreuse painted on the bottom of the head there. So then I do opt for just a straight green pumpkin a fair amount. and like it quite a lot. As you can see, I've trimmed these skirts down on these green pumpkin ones quite a lot. You know, basically down to the shank of the hook. Whereas standard, they do come a little bit longer. It's possible that I've even trimmed this black and blue one a little bit, but yeah, I will sometimes trim them pretty significantly depending on the trailer that I'm using. So the Jackhammer Chatterbait, no doubt about it, is number one for me. As I get into the summer months, I will start using straight white and black and blue, depending on the water conditions, depending on the forage, and depending on the light conditions that I'm working with. So if I'm fishing around shad, if I'm fishing during the day, um, I will throw white quite a lot. This silver blade throws off a lot of light, and the white stands out a lot in pretty much all water conditions. Now, if the water is dirty, or if I'm fishing at nighttime, I will use a black and blue. So you guys might have guessed black and blue because during the summertime I fish a fair amount at night, and I also deal with a lot of dirty water. So the black and blue Jackhammer Chatterbait was absolutely killer for me for a while this year. And for as a matter of fact, it was last year too. I remember there being a period of time for over a month last year in the 2020 season where I did not take off that black and blue jackhammer. I left it tied on for, I don't know, 10 or 20 trips in a row. The other color pattern that I do like to throw, but it's not quite as straightforward, is this green pumpkin shad. Very natural color pattern. So if I'm dealing with a little bit more clear water, I like to use this. It imitates a lot of different things, but especially in the post spawn and in the summertime, this can be a great baby bass imitation as well as a good shad pattern. So, um, yeah, that said, there are a number of other chatterbaits that I do use. Um, and I would say that the Strike King Thunder Cricket is one of my next most used, or was this season. I like it quite a lot. However, it's got quite a bit more subtle of an action. So part of what I like about the jackhammer is that it has such a hard thump, whereas the Thunder Cricket swings up and down on the head, if you can see that. And it has almost a little bit more freedom of movement. It doesn't make quite as much contact with the head. So it's quieter underwater and it vibrates. Um, the blade is almost moving quicker underwater. So it feels less intense, um, the vibration that it puts out, if that makes sense. So you can almost hear the sound that the jackhammer is making, but you can definitely feel it in your rod quite a bit more than you can with the Thunder Cricket. So I find that I go to the Thunder Cricket if I'm fishing bodies of water that are a bit more pressured or where I've been using the jackhammer a lot and having success. Then I will just switch over to that Thunder Cricket a little bit more frequently. That said, I also experimented with a bunch of other bladed jigs this year, including some of my handmade ones um, from that Queen Tackle Switchblade. And I threw um, the cross-eyes chatterbait and a handful of others that I was really looking to get more experience with this year. But it's hard to turn down that jackhammer when it's just so effective. So, Ron, I will get to the pink and purple rat in a few minutes. Um, well, maybe more than a few minutes, but it is technically on the list. So we will talk about it. All right. Justin says Rapala jerkbaits and the Z-Man TRD have absolutely killed it for me this year. Awesome, man. Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't put a significant amount of time into either of those baits this year, so I can't quite say the same. Though it's entirely possible that the same would have been the case for me had I dedicated the time. I still had some decent success on Rapala jerkbaits, but was mixing it up between 4 or 5 different baits, from the ripstop to the X-Wrap to the BX Minnow and a couple of other jerk baits that Rapala makes too. So yeah, not necessarily super specific. I like to mix it up sometimes, but at the same time, I will often go out and just throw what I am most confident in uh, when I'm limited on time or haven't caught a fish in a while, or I'm just kind of jonesing to catch a few fish. So Daniel says Chatterbait was my top in a green pumpkin. I didn't have the jackhammer. It was on the OG chatter. Color is called perch. That's cool. I thought I had. Oh, I gave it away, but they make a color pattern like this one. It's more of a bluegill pattern in that Weedless Project Z. I ended up giving it to a guy that I was fishing next to maybe about 2 or 3 months ago. And that was a really productive bait for me 2 seasons ago in the summertime. So ended up giving it to that gentleman. But this is a pretty good imitation of that bait, just made with one of those queen tackle switchblades. And this is actually a Dirty Jigs California swim jig. So you can see that gaff of a hook on there. So anyway, we can get off of the chatterbait for a minute. But of course, as always, feel free to ask any questions that you have about chatterbaits, about anything else specific as and when it comes to you. But I just want to, for the sake of keeping the conversation going, I want to move down the list a little bit. So Michael says, I really like the rip stops. You can fish it fast and it stops on a dime. No doubt about it. Yeah, I do too. In fact, I've been making a point to fish the smaller size one late in the season this year. Had a little bit of success on it. And yeah, I like it quite a lot. Typically, I prefer 3-hook jerk baits, and I do still throw that ripstop in the 11 size more than the 9. But yeah, it's a cool bait for sure. Matt says he didn't really use a chatterbait this year. Really mainly used swim jigs and the DRT shuttle jig. Whatever that means, dude. Nobody knows what the shuttle jig is. No, Ron. Ron says his Lucky Craft 1.5 crankbait, your number 2. It is not. No. In fact, a square bill didn't make the top 5. So, 2 and 3 are really soft plastics more than anything. And 1 was the Gee Crack, the Bellows Gill. So, this is the 2.8 size. I couldn't find my pack of the 3.8s. It's possible that I just ran out of them, and so that's why I can't find them. But as you guys know, I did just restock on them. So this is what she looks like in the 3.8. And if you can't tell, there's a reason I got this color in the 3.8 as I restocked. This green pumpkin chartreuse is an awesome color. Was very effective for me this year when using it in the 2.8. But in my opinion, a 3.8-inch size is the best size. Kind of strikes that balance between getting a lot of bites and getting the right kind of size. So that 2.8 size is rather small. I don't mind taking one of these out right now. But you can see that relative to my hand, it is small. So I caught a lot of 1 pound bass or even a little smaller than that on this 2.8-inch size. And for a bait that is not durable, that's a problem for me. So I kind of went out of my way to fish it where I knew that there would be slightly larger fish that would still go after this bait, but not compete with a bunch of tinier, smaller fish. Because I did run into that problem when I first used the 2.8. The 3.8 is a great overall size, and I caught some really reasonably good fish. A lot of 2 and 3 pounders, maybe one upwards of 4, but a lot of good sized fish for where I tend to frequent. So, couple ways that I was fishing that bait um, were on a drop shot, and more than anything on a weightless Texas rig. Okay. This year, as you guys know, I'm going to experiment with Nico rigging that bait with their Nico Hack terminal tackle accessory that I really look forward to using. So you can throw a nail weight in the head and then thread this piece of plastic through the center of the bait. And on the other side, it has a little hole that then you can thread your hook through. So you're not actually puncturing the soft plastic itself with your hook. So you're not going to tear the soft plastic, and should be able to catch a handful more fish per bait with that little hack. So I look forward to giving that a shot, and also potentially wacky rigging it instead of just Nico rigging it. We'll have to see about that. So yeah, that bellows gill was really good for me. It seemed that whenever I used it, I got bites quickly on it. And when I was using it, I would have very productive days as well. So that is one that made the list because it was just so good when I used it. Now, another bait that should not be surprising to you guys are the Max Scent Flatworm and the Max Scent Hitworm. I apologize that you see that these hitworms are just totally ripped to shreds, but there's a reason for that, okay? I fished the flatworm on a drop shot almost exclusively. They used to really only make it in this size, and this is a 3.6-inch drop shot bait. See, it's got that flat bottom, that bulbous tail, and it's got the max scent to it. So it's got a great action in the water. It is relatively heavy for its size, so it will sink. You do kind of have to work it a little bit more, but because of the scent dispersion, it drives fish wild. And because of that flat bottom, it has a really good action, and I find that it gets bit quite well. So I went through a couple packs of the flatworms, and then likewise with the hitworm. This is just a slightly larger bait. See if I have any full-size ones left in this bag. So this is a 4.5-inch bait that is perfectly round, tapers down, very narrow, and then has this thicker bulbous tail. So this is more of a shaky head style bait, but is also designed to be thrown on a drop shot first and foremost. So a little bit more versatility in what you can do with this bait. Because you can throw this on a weightless Texas rig, you can throw this on a shaky head, you can Carolina rig this thing, and you can throw it on a wacky rig, a Nico rig, or a drop shot. Really kind of as much as you want to imagine, this is an awesome bait. So what ends up happening is that eventually you start to tear up the section of the nose and or where the hook has penetrated through the bait. So what I will end up doing is ripping off the tail section, which is essentially the back half of the bait, and use this as multiple pieces for multi-species fishing when targeting bluegill and crappie and trout and perch. So literally you'll see a bunch of this stuff going on in this bag. I've got it in little chunks all over the place because I've found that small fish love to eat a little 1.5 inch section of these baits. And yeah, definitely one of, if not the most productive bait for me this year was the Berkley Max Scent Hitworm. So can't say enough good things about that bait, especially because I just caught so many dang different species with that bait. Of course, now my fingers reek of it, but that's how it goes. Bruce Nichols in the house. Sorry I did not address you when you first jumped in. How you doing tonight, man? Going fishing at your brother's pond tomorrow and Christmas. That's pretty awesome. Enjoy yourself. Daniel says, I have some gills on my list, but never pulled the trigger because I heard about durability not being great. Yeah, that was my problem and why I did not get into them until 2021. I had heard great things about them. In fact, a bunch of people trying to keep it on the hush hush. But when you combine durability with the price tag, understanding that you're paying $1.50 to $2 per bait, it kind of hurts to just think about. But once you actually tie it on, see the action, and see the way that the fish eat it, all of those worries go out the window very quickly. So keep that in mind. I would highly recommend that you go ahead and pick up a couple of packs. Don't go wild and stock up and spend $100, $200 on just the Geek Crack soft plastic baits. But I would recommend that you dip your toes in that water, as I did this past year, because you might be surprised and, like me, in a year from now be talking about how it was one of your more productive baits, one of the baits that impressed you most, etc. So last soft plastic, actually this one is kind of like a runner-up, so we're not going to talk about that just yet. Ron says, Tyler, have you tried putting an unscented bait into the Max Scent bag yet? No, man. I meant to do that like 12 times already, and I haven't. I'm sorry that I haven't. What I'm going to do, though, because I have the excuse to do it, is I'm going to take some of these Max Scent baits that I stocked up on, a month or two ago, and I'm pretty sure I got some of these in duplicates, didn't I? 3-inch, 4-inch, 4-inch. All right, so here's one. The 4-inch Max Scent Sugar Craw. That's at least one duplicate. And what I will try to do, even though these kind of fill up the bag decently well, I'm going to try and combine all of these baits into one package and then immediately put some other unscented baits, like some Zoom soft plastics, for example, into this guy, or maybe some Z-Man, to just see what happens and see how well those baits take on the Max Scent flavor, because that is something that I've been wanting to do. And if it works, oh baby, I am just waiting for the day, which could be in the next couple of years or maybe not for a long time, when Berkeley actually starts selling max scent like they do with Gulp and Power Bait and other formulas in bottles where you can just apply the scent directly to your baits. So hopefully that will happen sooner than later. Michael says the flatworms and the bellows are both packed with scent. I'm a believer in scent. I use it on baits, no doubt about it. I think the profile and the action of those baits definitely plays a role, but I would agree that the scent also plays a huge role, and I think was key in getting fish to bite. So good observation there, man. Interesting, Ron. I might do that. I won't do that if it's Z-Man, okay? Because Z-Man will all melt if I put it in there with the power bait max scent baits. They need to be left on their own, but they will absorb scent. So I would assume that if I put some Zoom Soft plastics that don't have scent on them in with the max scent, that it should be fine. And maybe that's what I should do to test it, is just take like 1 or 2 Zoom Soft plastics or Yum baits and just throw them in with a full pack of max scent and then check on them later and pull them out to see how well they've retained the max scent flavor. You got my brain working, so I appreciate it, man. Okay, next up is the Topwater Popper. Bruce says, I've got over 150 bags of soft plastic. It kills me to buy more. Yeah. I would not want to count how much I have in the way of soft plastics. Because honestly, until about 2 years ago, I fished soft plastics like 80% of the time. And now it's maybe like 40% of the time, 50% of the time. So I have a lot of soft plastics. And as you guys know, I've got boxes and boxes full of soft plastics. I don't even want to show you guys and admit it, but when you start doing the math, like there's 9 packs. And yeah, I've got probably 20 boxes full. And then I've got shoe boxes full, probably 20 to 30 packs in each of those. Some of these are technique specific, so these are all These are all drop shot baits. And it gets out of control pretty quickly. Obviously, you see everything that's behind me as well. And there's dozens and dozens of bags at my feet right now. So, yeah, I feel you, man. I'm right there with you. So, number 4 on the list for me, these last 2 are hard baits, but number 4 was a topwater popper. And there were a couple contenders. If I'm actually going to break it down into specific baits, because I've acquired a lot of new poppers over the last year or 2. So obviously I did not have the window of time to implement all of them once I actually got on that bite. But a few that were super, super productive for me. And I'm just going to mention 3 right now. And I think you'll be surprised, because we've got kind of a cheap, a medium, and an expensive. So here's the cheap, and this is just a straight up Rebel Pop R, the new Pop R, and this is the smaller size. This is like the 1/4 ounce, I believe. So this bait right here got absolutely mauled over the course of 2 or 3 days. Caught like 40 or 50 fish on it, and there was just something about it. I don't know if those bass were on bluegill and pushing them up in the shallows, or if it was just the sound profile, the sound and the blooping action of the bait on those days, or what. But good Lord, was it productive for me during that window of time. Then the Rapala X-Wrap Pop was a super good one for me. As you can see, the nose on this bait is a little bit different. It's got more of a triangular shape to it. And this thing sits a bit more horizontal in the water. This thing is a very good blooping bait as well, but it's got a deeper, almost one knock type of sound to it. And I don't know why, but night fishing, this thing was killer for me, almost to a fault. In fact, it was this same color pattern, a bait that has since been retired, that I hooked myself with in the thumb, very, very deep into the middle of my thumb. Had to go to the hospital earlier this summer. So this is actually a replacement bait of that same color, but I threw this bait in 3 or 4 different colors, and for a period of a couple of weeks, it was very good for me. And then last was the small Megabass. What do they call this? The Pop X. The Pop Max is the larger version, but the Pop X is the smaller version. This guy was great for me for a few days right before I got onto that Pop R bite. So this guy has a much more subtle sound to it, but it walks much better, and it leaves a bubble trail because of that slit in the nose of the bait. As you can see, the line tie is appropriately at the top of the nose on that bait. So really good design on that Megabass, and I liked it quite a lot. But I did not get to put so many of these baits to use like I wanted to. You know, the 6 Sense, I forget what they even call it, but their popper, I used a little bit. The Yellow Magic Magnum popper, the Megabass Pop Max, and even the Berkeley Bullet Pop, all got some use from me, but not enough to really warrant making the top of the list there. So Matt says, are you saucing those baits up that you have in the plastic containers? That's what I do over the winter, and let them sit and soak in Procure Trophy Bass Gel. I do like the Procure Trophy Bass, but no, I don't soak my baits when they're in the soft or the hard plastic containers. I'm just perhaps paranoid that they're going to warp the box that much more, or just stain it. I don't know. No real reason that I don't do that, but now you've got me thinking. Maybe that's something that I do want to do moving forward. So Thanks for bringing that up, Matt. But no, that's not something that I do. Michael says, do you use scent like smelly jelly or any others on your baits or plastics? I just like Matt was mentioning, I use the Procure Trophy Bass scent. Uh, Procure makes a bunch of different scents to target different species of fish. So they'll make a rainbow trout one that I use, and they make a trophy bass gel that I quite like. So I do use that, and yeah, there's a couple of scents that I use, but no, I am not religious about it. So I would say a decent majority of the baits that I use are already scented. So I'm not constantly applying scent to my baits, but if I find that I'm going to be using Zoom or Yum or Z-Man or a couple of other brands that do not already have scent on them, then I will usually opt to scent them up. So keep that in mind. Ron's got to head out of here. Yeah, it's late, man. You know, I'm sad. Sorry to hear that, dude. Um, Crazy that now you're on a 3-hour swing where it used to be a very reasonable time for you to be able to watch. Now it's freaking late. It's past midnight. So I apologize, Ron, but appreciate you stopping in for these first 45 minutes. And Merry Christmas to you as well. Bruce says, Tyler, do you know any local kids that would want a fly rod and reel? I mean, yeah, probably depends on what it is and what you'd be selling it for. You know, shipping a fly rod is not the easiest thing, but you said you've got a White River combo, brand new, sitting at your brother's that you never use. Why won't you ever use it, man? Why can't you use it at your brother's pond and try to do some fly fishing for bass? I could tie you up some flies, streamers and such that you could make a point to get into fly fishing for bass and have some fun. Maybe we should talk about that offline or another time, but I appreciate you asking. It's just complicated when trying to ship rods. So you've got flies to go with it. Well, I've already got three really high end fly combos myself that serve my purposes, but I'm about at that age where, or my kids are about at that age where they're going to start getting into fly fishing in the next couple of years. And I haven't really considered what I'm going to get them, but do I know any local kids that would want? I don't know. Let me think about that, man. I appreciate you asking. Matt says, for those Pop X and the Pop Maxes where the gill part is, where it creates bubbles, I take red lure marker from Do It and color the gills. It looks really good from the bottom. Yeah, interesting. I have seen that, heard that before. Did not think to do that this season, but that's a good idea. I don't have red, but well, these are just the dyes or the scents. No, that's Chartreuse. That's black. Little 2-in-1. This is the Spike It Stinkum markers. So crawfish and stinkum. I do use the Spike It markers from time to time, especially when coloring tails or to add a lateral line or a shad dot. or potentially even color eyes on some soft plastics. So yeah. You know what, Bruce? That's super generous of you. I appreciate you even asking. I do want to think about it though, and give it some thought. That's super nice of you, and I'm sure that I could find somebody to pay it forward and do right by. I just wouldn't want it to be someone totally random. You know, I would want it to be a kid in my neighborhood or a family friend, or a friend's kid, something like that. So let me give it some thought. But thank you so much. People are popping fireworks down the street from you guys. I think that's my son crying, but it's about that time of night, and we are working on training him to sleep through those initial hunger pangs, and not feed him so frequently throughout the night. Not that it was ever so frequently. For the last couple months, he's only been eating once or twice during the nighttime. But last night, I made the mistake of feeding him like at 11 or 11:30, and so he's already waking up, kind of thinking about it, making some noise. So yeah, I had some people. There was like a legit fireworks show here just a few days ago in our neighborhood, and believe it or not, it caused a pretty giant fire. It wasn't in our neighborhood, but right outside where there's some open space. And it was like a 10 or 15-minute show, giant fireworks. And I don't know what the occasion was. It's like December 19th. And next morning, we found out that there was a large fire. And I don't think anybody's houses burned down, but it took a few hours for firefighters to be able to put it out. So, well, thank you, Bruce. Okay, yeah, Facebook, that should work fine, or you can email me at hooksets are free 18 at gmail.com. I just put it in the chat for you there. That's an email that you guys can hit me up at anytime if you want to chat offline about anything that is more specific. And then I'm always willing to give you guys my cell number as well. Nail polish would work really well, says Matt. Yeah, man. In fact, I just whittled down my first couple bodies for what will be a flat sided balsa crankbait. New project that I'm taking on, and there's definitely a learning curve. The carving turned out good, and I'll show you guys probably next week because those bodies are just waiting. One of them is a solid body where I will drill a hole and put um, some lead in, and then glue it over the top. And the other one is actually going to be a wire through body. So it's got two separate pieces that I'm going to bend the wire and set in the middle, and then glue the other piece on top of it, so that I'm not actually screwing in the hook hangers and the line tie. I'm gonna try kind of both ways and see how that goes. So I did pick up some. I've already got nail polish, but I picked up some uh, paint and permanent markers, things to try and play around with first before getting like an airbrush system. I don't know that I really want to go all the way down that road, but I found that picking up some balsa wood from Hobby Lobby and a little carving knife was cheap. So I couldn't help but try that out. And they look great so far. They're like a 2.5 inch flat side crankbait that has a pretty deep belly, and I think you guys will like the look of it. I'd be happy to share with you guys the the link, the stencil that I have. I want to see if I can share that here with you guys right now. There's like a template that I downloaded. Hmm. Definitely a document saved in my Google Drive right now, so I don't know that I can paste it to you guys, but I could probably email it to you if you wanted it. Um, and so essentially, you just cut out the template and trace it onto the balsa, and then carve around that. And yeah, it's pretty good looking stencil. And saw some videos of it on YouTube, liked the look of it, so I decided to give it a shot. All right, number 5 on my list for most productive baits for me was a wake bait, believe it or not. So Ron didn't quite stay on long enough to talk about his favorite bait, which is the Morning Dawn Rat from Spro. But this is the size 50. I throw the size 40 the most, and have talked about that quite a bit here. In fact, that and the size 30 are up in the garage. They pretty much never make their way back down here and into the box until it's the off season. And then I pull them out like early summer. So that is one of my most productive baits. But this guy right here, not an expensive bait. This is the KVD 2.5 wake bait from Strike King. And this bait in a few different color patterns were very productive for me this year. They're all up in the garage with my other with those rats. So all the ones in this box right now are duplicates. I've still got 8 of them that are duplicates, but listen to this knock. This thing is a wide body, pretty decent profile, and it's really loud and methodical. It wakes very well on the surface when worked slowly. And if you burn this thing, it will only go an inch or two subsurface. So this is not one that will crank down to maybe 6 inches or a foot below the surface like that Spro Rat is. So this is a true top water wake bait, and it's really good at what it does. So in fact, I have set this color aside to send to Ron per a conversation that we had, I don't know, a month ago or something. I told him that I had a duplicate in that color. He said he was going to get it, and I said I would send it to him. So those are my top 5, believe it or not. So chatterbait, specifically the Jackhammer Chatterbait, max scent flatworm, and hitworm. The hitworm was probably better for me than the flatworm. Drop shot was probably my number 1 way of fishing those baits. The Gee Crack Bellows Gill was number 3 for me on a weightless Texas rig, and specifically in the 3.8 inch size. The Topwater Popper was number 4 for me, and arguably more in the smaller 1/4 ounce or 3/8 ounce size, not the larger 1/2 ounce sizes. And then last was a wake bait, and I would say that this KVD 2.5 was perhaps the most productive for me, just because that Spro Rat for me is almost exclusively a nighttime bait. Uh, I will occasionally throw it early morning or late in the evening when the light is low, but I almost exclusively fish that at nighttime. Whereas this wake bait, I had success at all hours of the day and almost as much or more success than the rat when fishing it at nighttime. So this was a bait that I didn't fish in 2020 more than a couple of times. And then I used it quite a lot in 2021 and had tremendous success on it. So those guys make the top of my list, and we'll move on to a handful of other baits that make the list for me, and then finish off by talking about a couple of techniques that I did not use as much as I had planned to or wanted to, and that I hope to change next year. Michael says, "What are your favorite spinners, and have you tried the Acme Spin Master? Also, do you use the Pistol Pete flies? If so, what are your favorite colors?" Um, Favorite inline spinners. Good question. So I wish I had that box with me, and I should have known you were going to ask some of that stuff, because I did bring down my trout fishing hard bait box, and this is more multi-species than trout fishing, but in here I've got the Dynamic Lures HD trouts in here that you asked about last time and we talked about, and I was prepared for you to bring that up and for me to show you guys a couple of the colors that I use in this bait. Like I told you, that brown trout is probably my number 1 color pattern. Throw that ghost brown trout. I don't know where all my rainbow trout patterns are at the moment, but that pink one's pretty good for me. I even like this ghost white. You see, I've got 2 of them in here. So I should be able to answer that for you. I throw Meps, I throw Blue Fox, but there is specifically, oh, it was just on the tip of my tongue. The Thomas Lures EP Spin, I believe it's called. That one is killer. It pretty much is just gold beads going up the shank, and a gold spinner blade on it. Really like that one. And I'm gonna have to pull out that box to be able to talk about my inline spinners, because I don't throw them all that much. That was definitely a bait that I used more when I was first getting into not fly fishing, I should say. When I was using a spinning rod a lot, doing a lot of multi-species fishing, etc., I used more inline spinners than I do now. I do use the Pistol Pete flies. I prefer the smaller sizes than the larger ones. So I think they make them in as small as like a size 12. I find that the size 6 are pretty overpowering and pretty large. So I've started to make my own versions of the Pistol Pete flies. You can get your own spinner blades to throw on the front of a woolly bugger or anything else like that that you're throwing. So I do like the woolly bugger versions of the Pistol Pete flies. And I also really like the South Platte Special, I believe it's called. Um, don't quote me on that. So we could potentially have a conversation off offline where we talk more trout specific things like that. But I appreciate you asking the question. Yes, I've used the speed wake from 6 Cents. In fact, I've got a couple of them sitting right here, man. And I've got a couple up in the garage. So, yeah, definitely a good bait. This is essentially another remake that 6 Cents did of a bait that used to be on the market that was really popular, at least among pros, and for some reason went discontinued. And I believe that was the Strike King Wake Shad, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Daniel, I think you can get airbrushes and paints, get a starter kit for like $100, but I'm not necessarily committed to getting into that. So we will see. Dennis says, have you tried free rigging with the bellows gill? No. In fact, at the very end of this list, the free rig makes one on the list of techniques that I did not give enough attention to this year, did not give a fair shake, and hope to change that next year. So I didn't free rig much of anything. I only tried the free rig a few times, and I kind of regret that. So no is the short answer to your question. I found that weightless was the most effective. It is a pretty heavy bait. It does not sink super fast, but it is definitely not a slow sink. And it's got a great action on its own. So I would only free rig it if fishing quite a bit deeper. But when fishing around bedding fish or in warmer water where fish are up shallow, you really don't need to be throwing it on a free rig or a drop shot or even a Texas rig, anything that's weighted. Now, I'm sure it would be awesome on a Carolina rig and on a free rig. So, by all means, I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I did not give it the time of day. All right. These are the runner ups. I would say baits that were still productive for me, but did not quite make the list of top 5 status. And first up, because it falls into a very similar category as like that Maxent hitworm in how versatile it was for me, is the Mule Fishing Donkey Tail Junior. This is a new bait, relatively speaking, made by a friend of mine, a fellow Discount Tackle brand ambassador. Mule Fishing is a brand by Ethan Do Better, aka Online Outdoorsman, on Instagram and on YouTube. And at this point, he has now 3 different soft plastics out and some jig heads. This is the downsized version of his swim bait, and it's a 1.6 inch elastomer style soft plastic swim bait. Absolutely deadly on trout, on panfish of all kinds, on perch, and on bass. And, I even caught a 3-pound bass on this tiny little 1.6 inch bait. So I loved using this thing. And yeah, I pretty much throw it in the same place or in the same way that you would a Leland Lures trout magnet. So You can even use it on a trout magnet jig head and just throw this thing under a float and let it sit and suspend in the water um, at whatever depth you need it to. But this is essentially a float and fly type of bait, and it's awesome. So the Donkey Tail Junior was one that I did not give a try until this year. I think he just released them in 2020 and then started selling them at Discount Tackle and offered to send me some as well this season. And I used them a lot and had a lot of success. So that makes the list for me in terms of just how many different types of fish I caught on it and how many fish I caught on it. Does not have scent, so I do like to add scent to those guys when fishing them. No, Mule doesn't make a craw. They make like a mayfly type of imitation. So, um, yeah, no craws just yet. But really good deal in what you get. Originally, I don't know that they're packaged exactly the same anymore, but as you can see, these things come with like 12 in a pack, and they're $5. And they're made from like an Elastec type of material, so they last forever. Pretty amazing. Okay. Michael says, "Nice. You got every color of the HG trout." Yeah, that sounds good. I love this fish for all species. I love to fish for all species, um, except for sucker fish. LOL. Yeah, I hear you, man. Cool. Well, we should definitely talk offline sometime, or feel free to ask questions, and I will just make a mental note. If I can't answer your question on the spot, then I will try to do like I did tonight. And maybe I'll bring my inline spinners to next week's stream so that we can talk about that. But yeah, in this box, I've got jerk baits galore, from floating jerk baits to um, countdown and suspending jerk baits. And then I've got micro square bill crankbaits and small lipless crankbaits. Grasshopper and bug style wake baits and shallow diving crankbaits. I've got topwater poppers and kind of a little bit of everything in this box, and I love it. Yeah, the Mule horsefly. Yeah, that's the one you were thinking of. It's a new release. He just came out with it like a month ago, and it's really a like a mayfly imitation, but horsefly. I think is more a play on words and the name itself. Everything for him, name wise, has to do with the brand being Mule Fishing, and a lot of the colors have to do with his pets and his family members, and all sorts of stuff like that. Even the Morning Dawn, he calls Dakota Sunrise, and his dog's name is Dakota. So yeah, I don't know, but Ethan makes some good stuff, and he's a good guy too. So definitely want to support that. If you were trying to go after some bull rainbow and browns, what would you use, Tyler? I might want to go for some since the bite has been tough and I know where to find some. Uh depends on the time of year and how much current you have. Are you talking about moving water? Or are you talking about still water? Because I would throw something like a countdown style jerk bait that is going to sink, assuming you're fishing in current. I would throw something like that. Or I would throw something like the donkey tail, or a fly imitation, something that looks like a worm. Um, so a San Juan worm or a squirmy wormy, something along those lines is always a good option. But then, of course, you could throw something like a woolly bugger. You could throw, um, a trout magnet is always pretty tough to beat. Daniel says 1/64th is a great crappie weight, in my opinion. That's what the trout magnet is. And yeah, mule jigs are awesome. They go all the way down to 1/80th of an ounce. Yeah, I've used that 1/80th. It's tiny though. The hook on it is like don't quote me on it, but it's probably like a size 10 hook, really small. And it's tough to thread on the mule soft plastics because they are made from Elastec. So, all right, the Ned Rig is next on my list. Productive bait for me this year. Has been for a number of years, and I'm not going to stop throwing it. I like it better than a wacky rig stick bait. Um, that said, the next on the list is a weightless stick bait. I probably threw a little bit more of a weightless Texas rig than I did a wacky rig this year, just due to vegetation growing up, um, almost overgrowing in a lot of areas that I fish. So, yeah, the Ned rig and the weightless Texas rigged stick bait were probably hand in hand in terms of solid producers whenever I use them, but also kind of techniques that I tried to get away from using quite as much this year, just because I am trying to fish faster, and was a little bit limited on time per session that I went out this year. So if I've only got a couple hours to fish, I'm not really wanting to pick apart an area where I'm making a cast every few minutes or every 5 minutes, um, with something that's not going to cover enough water for me. So that said, both of those techniques worked for me, and I did come to like the Yum Ned, no, the Yum Dinger more than I ever did or thought that I would. Super slow sinking. So when you combine that with the weedlessness of a weightless Texas rig, it's perfect for fishing grass that has grown up almost to the surface, or fishing super shallow water where really the action of the bait doesn't matter quite as much as the profile and the color of the bait. So that summer gill color of the Yum Dinger was surprisingly good. Heard that from Frank Scalish on Bass Talk Live, I believe, like a year ago. Michael, I do not have any Euro tackle anything. What's up, Grayson? You're a little late, man. We're an hour and 20 minutes in, but good to see you, my man. Daniel says, which stick bait is your favorite? Zoom, Yamamoto, etc. That's tough to say. Um, for a while, It was this guy right here. Just a straight up 6-inch Bass Pro Shops Sticko. Specifically in this laminate color. This one will show a little bit better for you. Green pumpkin on one side, watermelon red on the other. I like a 6-inch for the more dramatic action that it has, the faster fall, the better casting distance, etc. But I don't throw a stick bait with just that action very often. So I would say arguably my favorite is the Zoom Magnum Finesse Worm, because I fish this thing Nico rigged and on a shaky head just as much as I throw it wacky rigged, and I like it for all of those techniques. So when it comes to versatility, I really like the Magnum Finesse Worm from Zoom. Kimberly Patty, what is VarkTech? Because I'm pretty sure you're just BSing. Never heard of VarkTech. Okay. Fourth on my my list of, say, runner-up baits was the Finesse Jig. I threw a fair amount of Finesse Jigs this year, and it ranged. There were probably 3 or 4 of them that I fished more than others. I threw the Drop Dead Ned, if that's what it's called, from Battle Baits. Really liked that bait. Which is pretty much similar to the Z-Man Finesse Shrooms Micro Jig. I threw the... Oh, I'd almost need to look, because I remember that there were a handful that I used before I started making my own. 2K Jigs makes one with living rubber, and once I finally lost that, it kind of inspired me. You know, I pretty much used the Battle Baits and the 2K Jigs ones most, but you know, like look at this one from 2K Jigs. That one doesn't have a weed guard on it, but is all living rubber. That thing was nasty with a baby pit boss on there. Yeah, did really well for me. The Battle Baits Drop Dead Ned is more of a finesse cut skirt. Throw something like a Z-Man TRD Craws on there, killer. And then I started tying my own, and I have kind of gone overboard in making a bunch of my own. And so I've got them with rubber and marabou. I've got them pretty much with rubber, but I'm throwing them on a wide variety of heads that are pretty much Gamakatsu, Owner, and then some Z-Man as well, for those weedless heads. So, yeah, the Finesse Jig was one that definitely made the list for me, to the point where I started picking up These are like the Bass Patrol Finesse football jigs in living rubber. And yeah, we could talk about that kind of stuff for a long time. But next on the list is the Whopper Plopper. I threw the 75 a lot this season. I threw the 110 the next most, but the 110 and the 130 did not get a lot of use from me. The 75 did, and it did its job like I would expect it to. I picked up the 60 kind of late in the season. Only tried it once or twice and did not give it the time of day. Was not impressed by it straight out of the gate. It is super, super finessey. So I might need to throw it on like 2-pound mono. Joking, but not really. It definitely needs to be thrown on an ultra light, and the action is not dramatic. So that 75 is my favorite for sure in the Whopper Plopper. I will probably try the 75 size Chapo in the next year or so, but we'll see about that. Next on the list, shallow diving crankbaits. So the Rapala Dt4 has been a workhorse for me for years now, as well as 1.5 size square bills. So I have decided to branch out a little bit this year in picking up new square bill crankbaits to try for next year. And I put some of them to work this year. With the dual hardcore square bill and a handful of others that are just not coming to mind right this second. 13 fishing scamp, and yeah, but I've picked up at least a handful more that I'm really excited about using, and not just square bills, but also just shallow diving square bills or shallow diving crankbaits in general. I also threw a lot of micro-sized crankbaits and jerkbaits that I showed you from this box here when fishing for trout and lake trout and panfish. So those, like they have been for a number of years, were pretty productive for me, and will continue to be. I've got a lot of confidence in them. I don't throw a lot of like small to mid-sized jerk baits in that 2-hook range that are 3.5 to 4 inches long. I throw small, and then I jump up and throw standard size 3-hook jerk baits, and that's pretty much how it goes. The fluke, the swim bait, and the frog were also productive for me, but not techniques that I used a lot. Okay. Daniel says, does that black seem to be the go-to color in the plopper? By a long shot, okay? This color is called Loon, Loon. And yeah, gotta have it. Day or night, all water conditions, it's the one. Okay. No, you start with black. It will outdo bone for sure. If you're only going to start with one, you get the Loon. The Beast Coast Hustler Hybrid Finesse Jig is money, says Michael. Yeah, that's part of what inspired me to make these jigs with living rubber and marabou in them. And I've made a bunch of different versions of these guys. I thought I had more of them sitting close by here. I don't know where they all are at the moment, but some of these I've cut down the skirting material in the middle. Some of these I've cut like a finesse jig, where up front here it's really short by the head and then it's long over the Marabou, but yeah, that Beast Coast Hustler looks like a pretty beastly and awesome jig. But at like 5, $6 a pop, I thought, you know what? I could make them for less than $2 a pop myself, and I'm gonna give that a shot. So as for the techniques that I did not use as much this year, but thought that I would, and I can pretty much assure you I will change that this year, are jerk baits, lipless crankbaits, mid diving crankbaits, topwater walking baits, bigger swim baits. All of those are ones that and even frogs to a certain extent. Even though the window of time for me to throw frogs is pretty narrow, all of those techniques I did not dedicate enough time to. Um, I like fishing them. I did not get on the right bite at the right time. I never committed to using those baits. So it's unfortunate. Um, what can you do? As for a few other techniques, the free rig, like I said, throwing a football jig, throwing a wobble head were ones that I really didn't do much of, but thought that I would. And I'm sure there's a bunch of other things that fall into that category, but that I'm not thinking of right now. You know, flipping, for example, and some things that are a little bit more technique specific. You know, I didn't expect that I would throw a spy bait very much this year, but I really like the idea of this kind of homemade spy bait with a soft plastic swim bait without the tail on it, but rather with a prop blade. I like to think outside the box a little bit. Hey, a buzz bait is also something that I went out of my way to really stock up on and get a wider variety, and then just didn't use them like I thought I would. A swim jig is one that historically I have used a lot. It's been like the chatterbait, and if that bite's not on, I will just go to a swim jig. And for some reason, I did not do as much of that this year. So that will probably change. I'll go back to throwing a swim jig as much, or maybe even more than a chatterbait next year, just to avoid my fish getting too conditioned to a chatterbait. That said, I'm going to throw the crap out of a chatterbait. What am I saying? Michael says the Spro Little John Fat 50 is a great crankbait. Yeah, that's one that I don't really have and need to get. You know, the Spro Rock Crawler, and it's specifically the Rock Crawler medium diver that goes 4 to 8 feet, and then the Rock Crawler 50 that also goes 4 to 8 feet, but is a smaller body, are really the Spro crankbaits that I use, and they fall more into like the wiggle work category of mid diving crankbaits, which is what I said I planned to use a lot more of this season, but just didn't for whatever reason. But yeah, that Fat John is one that I need to get. Yeah, Bruce, wouldn't be a bad idea if you end up liking Ned Rigs, get them mold because yeah, the price of the heads, it does add up, but you got to think about just how much you're going to throw the Ned Rig. Um, you know, if you put $100 into terminal tackle, you'll be good for a while. Because really you're paying like $1 per jig for those Ned heads, where you'd be spending almost half that on the mold itself. But if you already have a mold and pour your own lead heads for other types of jigs, then I guess that makes sense. But if you need to get, you know, a pot for melting lead, if you need to get all of the materials to pour your own jig heads, then I don't think it probably makes sense. But if you are going to do so, I would highly encourage you to use Gamakatsu hooks. You can find them a little bit cheaper than you can find owner hooks, and you're going to find that you like them a lot better than you like Mustad or other brands that you can buy quite a bit cheaper. Gamakatsu is probably the best middle ground for um, not crazy expensive, but really good quality. Okay. Guys, we've been on for an hour and 36 minutes. We got 8 people in here. A few people just jumped out. I am going to jump out as well. It's 11 o'clock my time. I have got a couple of things to do in preparation for Christmas, including a little family love letter that we do as a tradition in my family. Every year, we write a letter to a different person in our family. We rotate every year. It's randomized, and we all write one letter to another person. We don't write it to each other, um, but out of like the 10 adults in my family, we all are in charge of writing one letter to another person. And I have not written my letter. I've got tonight, which it's pretty much bedtime, and tomorrow to write that letter. So I'm probably at this point going to be up late tomorrow night writing that letter. Like I said, I've also got some Santa Claus activities to get around to. So, guys, thank you so much for hanging out. Super fun. And hope you all have a super Merry Christmas. I will see you next week before New Year's. So, I'm not going to say Happy New Year just yet, but Merry Christmas. Stay safe. And thank you for your support. If you haven't already, hit the thumbs up button. And I will see you guys on the next one. Peace. You're welcome, Daniel.